this page. It is very practical for you because you have the essential. The essential is very scientific. For example, the metaphysical argument. First, prime mover, first mover. Second, necessary being, contingency. Self-existent, first cause. Here, in the order of causes. Uncause cause. And after that, we have the physical argument that the order and the finality. Order and finality. If there is order and a sign of intelligence, and finality, there is also intelligence. And finally, it is what we are going now to study. We call here, Father Wallace called that subsidiary evidences, or if you want, the moral arguments, the moral arguments. So I go to page 298, covering rapidly two arguments. The moral argument by moral obligation, the moral obligation, and the second one is universal consent. And Father Wallace attached to moral obligation the need for sanction and the desire for happiness. In fact, they go together. They go together. Well, the moral obligation as an argument or conscience was stressed in particular by Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant starts from the fact of duty. Remember, we know God from facts. And he said there is a fact for every man on earth. It is the fact of duty. We must accomplish our duty. The ideal is to practice duty for duty. So moral obligation. And also the existence of conscience. The remorse, experience of remorse. Nobody saw us, but we feel guilty because when we did that, there was someone supervising us, the eye of God. Okay? So the moral obligation. In fact, we start from the fact of conscience and we arrive to a moral obligation. If I have a moral obligation, there must be a law. So, the conscience, through my conscience I discover moral obligation or duty. Duty. If there is duty, there must be a certain kind of law obliging me. A law obliging me. And if there is a law obliging me, there must be a lawgiver. Someone who gives the law, a legislator. Not only a legislator, but the one who can judge me, a judge. And the one who give also reward or punish, etc. And here, most of the time, the majority of religion, they have a part of fear, the fear of God. In fact, in the Bible, we see the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Timor Domini initium sapientia. At the beginning, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay? It's a universal principle. You remember when you were 10 years old? The fear of the Lord, the fear of the Father. Okay. So a duty, and Kant starts from the fact of duty, and he said if we have duty, an obligation, there must be, and there is no justice on earth, no reward on earth. I must be punished or I must be rewarded in the next world. Therefore, my soul is immortal. So he arrived to the immortality of the soul. Immortality of the soul. And he said, if there is no justice on earth, there must be someone who will give justice. A judge, a legislator. So he arrived to the approval of the existence of God. And finally he said, if I must accomplish a good life, if I am obliged, it is because I am free, freedom. So St. Thomas starts from metaphysics, to arrive to ethic. But Kant does not accept metaphysics because he says, in the line of Hume, he says we know only what we can measure. You know, he said we know only the noumen. We don't know the phenomenon. Excuse me, we know only the phenomenon. We don't know the noumen. That's what I mean, what is under the phenomenon. So because of that, he said we cannot use metaphysics to arrive to God. We arrive to God to prove the existence of God because of the universal fact of duty. And St. Thomas also recognized that. Recognized that the moral proof. He did not recognize Kant because he lived 400 years before Kant. But he recognized the value of that moral proof. For many people, maybe that proof is stronger than the metaphysical proof. Because they are afraid to go to hell or etc. Okay? The fear of the Lord. In fact, our relation with God many times is based on fear. Unfortunately, or is based on the fact we depend on God when we have problem. When we have problem, we go to God. After 9/11, the churches in the United States were packed with people. 2-3 weeks after, it's funny, the collection diminished. You know, we are beggar. Our relation to God is beggar. It's a relation of fear also. We go to Mass because we are afraid to commit a mortal sin. We don't do that because we are afraid. That is, but it is better than nothing, no? Timor Domini, initium sapientiae. Timor Domini. The greater the fear of the Lord, it is a gift of the Holy Spirit, don't forget. Timor Domini, initium sapientiae. Initiation, it is the beginning of wisdom, sapientiae. Okay. Now another proof. Saint Father Wallace has the necessity for sanction. In fact, intellectualists can't speak about that when he speak about immortality and the necessity of God to judge. You know, necessity of sanction. If I am obliged, if I do well, it should be recompense. If I do evil, I should be punished. You know? Okay? And the desire for happiness. When you study philosophy of man, you remember that voluntas ut natura, our will as nature, with natura, we are tending toward the perfect good. You remember that? We have an appetite for the perfect good. It is the reason why on earth we are never satisfied. Never satisfied. Because on earth we have the perfect good. And because of that we can make choices. Because when we be in front of the perfect good, we will will it without making a choice. We will it. Our choice will be to have him, to accept it. Okay. If you go to the bottom of page 298, that tendency was experimented, for example, by St. Augustine. St. Augustine was, in fact, he was not happy as long as he did not discover God, the real God. Okay, so the second argument, the first argument is the moral argument, moral education, moral argument. The argument we find in Kant, in St. Thomas also. Okay, the second argument is the argument of the universal consent, universal recognizing of God, universal consensus, universal consensus, or universal belief. You know, that is a fact. When you study sociology, we know that religion is a pillar of any society. We cannot study a society without studying religion of that society. Even communist country. When I was in Russia in 1972, September, I discovered that at that time there was a minister of the cult of religion in Russia, and they paid the priest, Orthodox priest. And then even, we cannot deny people, either they accept God or they reject God, but they have a relation with God, or goddess. And in the time of the Roman, the Greek, it was so powerful that because the gods were identified with the city, with the politic. They were identified. For example, for the Egyptian, the gods were identified with the emperor, with the pharaoh. Okay, so that is a fact. So why we can say, okay, is it because it is a fact that from immemorial time, men on earth, because atheists are exceptional in the history of the world, atheists are very, very, very few. The majority recognize that. Okay, so is it sufficient to say that God exists? No. The argument is not sufficient. Number does not make the truth. It is one of the mistakes of democracy. Because in democracy, number makes the truth, make the morality. If abortion is good, if you have 51% of people, they vote for that, you know. Or Supreme Court, 5 against 4, you know. Well, in fact, the number does make the truth. Before Galileo, for thousands of years, people believed that the earth was the center of the world. Every morning, the sun was waking up at the east and going up at the west. You know? And the center was, all the stars, everything turned around the world. Huh? It was, you know, were they right? No. So the number does not make the truth. But if all the people thought that there was a reason, the reason was because they expressed what they saw. They saw that, they said, okay. In the case of universal belief, we can ask why, okay, it's a fact that in the majority of culture, can say the totality of culture, there was a kind of religion, or anti-religion, astrology, or sorcery, etc. Okay, we can ask why that is universal. Not because it is not because it is universal that it is good. You know, it is not because 2 million people watch a program that the program is necessarily good. But I can say, if because the program is good, 2 million people watch it. So the reasoning is, can we establish the proof of God on the universal concept directly like that because of the number? I say no. But I can say, if man who is intelligent, and the caveman was intelligent, my ancestors were all intelligent since the first one, because it is our specific difference to be intelligent. So my ancestors asked questions, and they arrived to reasoning, to discover that they depend on the God of rain, the God of the sun, they depend, and because they depend, they created a relation with the sun. You know, we saw before, what is one of the proof of the existence of God is dependence. Dependency. We depend on Him. So our ancestors, for centuries, they were aware that they depend on some power, some God, some personal God, and because of that, they believe in God. So in fact, their belief in God was motivated, was reasoned. They have a reason to believe in God. So it's not only the fact that people believe in God that is true. It is not because the majority of people, they eat pizza or eat hamburger that is good for health. It's not because everyone eats pizza in the United States that is good for health. You know? But if it is, I can ask why they eat pizza. There must be a reason for that. You know, it must be reasonable. There must be an explanation. It's the same. If all people believe in God for thousands of years, there must be a reason for that. And that reason is the same as the first proof of the existence of God, the 5 proofs, the same thing. and they establish a relation with God. But this relation is religion, expression of my dependence on a supreme being, or many, or one being. Yes, brother?
Vox populi, vox Dei.
Yes, yes, but that is not absolute. It's not absolute. But it must be confirmed by the authority of the Pope. It's not necessary. That is, I can give you some example. Vox populi is not necessarily vox Dei. You know, more, for example, more and more, you know, the number of marriages in some parishes is almost nothing. No? That people don't marry, therefore, that is vox populi. Is it vox Dei?
I don't think so.
Is the voice of the people. It's not necessarily the voice of God. No, forget, number does not make truth. That is the vice, I think, for me, it's the intrinsic vice of democracy. Because it is the number, the general will of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 50 plus 1, that makes the legality. In fact, we confond legality with morality. We see that when we study ethics. It's only a foretaste. Okay. So, well, I gave you after that some, you know, page 299, you have an excellent summary here by Father McCormick. It can help you. You can read that. It's not difficult. On page 300, he said, you know, the proof of the existence of God from metaphysical proof, they are abstract. And for many people, the most powerful proof are the moral proof. For many, that moral proof. It is very strong for them. Or the proof of the desire, you know, cosmological, physical proof. But what is metaphysics for many one, you know, pure act. Pure act. If you did not study metaphysics, I say God is pure act. What would have been your thought? Huh? He used a good soap. Huh? He's clean. He's clean, pure. Huh? No. Huh? Pure means not mixed with potency. Potency, what is that? You know, the class of metaphysics is necessary to contribute to study, especially theology. So it is the summary of that. I go now to the next paragraph we have to study tonight, is the essence of God and is attributed to God.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Number 44. So the first paragraph, it is a summary of what we said just before. Huh? So the next paragraph, it is, can man know who is God? So there now remains the task of making explicit what is implicitly contained in the concept of God in general. The God we discover in the 5 proof or in the 7 proof, depending on how you count them. Okay? So we try to discover God from the proof of the existence of God. I don't have time to do that, but in the other class I spend hours about that. We take the proof, and from the proof we discover who is God, the attributes of God, because we know God through His effects. Okay? So I continue. To what extent explicit knowledge of this kind possible? God is transcendent. So what we discovered, God is absolutely above everything, totally apart. You remember that? Sanctus. Sanctus. God is apart, separated, sanctus, transcendent. But why? Because He is perfect. He is all. He is holy, complete. Extend that, they already in class. Holy and sanctus. Okay, I continue. And though man can name Him, we can give a name to God. In fact, St. Thomas, he does not say all the time attributes of God. He says the names of God. So the names of God are the same thing as the attribute. And what is an attribute? You have a subject and you have many predicates. And you give to the subject those predicates. That is attribute. So we give to God attribute, is justice, mercy, intelligence, love, etc. Okay. So that, in fact, can we define God? When we study logic, we thought that we give a definition using genus and specific difference. The genus, it is above the specific difference, but there is nothing about God. Nothing about being, because if there is something above being, it is being. So we cannot define God by genus and specific difference. But this does not mean that man can do nothing about God by reason alone. Man can know God philosophically, if only, but only in an imperfect way. We know something about God. First, we know that God exists. That is the most important. What God answered to Moses when Moses asked him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I am who I am. I am." Period. Okay? Existence. But we can, from the proof of the existence of God, discover the attributes of God. The perfection we find in God. Because we find those perfections in His creation. In fact, the creation is the mirror of God. We don't know God directly. Even in the Bible, nobody wants to see God face to face. They see the back. We see the effect of God. We see what He did, His action, His operation, but we don't know Him directly. Okay? But of course it is imperfect. And we saw that in logic, every spiritual reality can be known only through analogy. Remember that, through analogy, through comparison. We cannot have a perfect knowledge. In every comparison, there is a part of similarity and a part of difference. We saw that last week. A part of similarity, a part of difference. That means when we speak about God, we discover something common between God and us, but we see also an infinite difference. Yes, brother?
So, yeah, the Bible says that people being one able to see or being one. So, my question is, our senses are not made to see God,
no,
or to feel God, or to...
No, they cannot.
It's a limitation in our senses?
Yes, we are limited. I mean, even physically. For example, a dog has a smelling much more perfected than your maybe 40 times or 40,000 times. I don't know. It's incredible. An eagle has a better eye than I have. You know, we are limited by our senses. Our senses are, you said that, there is a top and a bottom. If it is too bright, I cannot see. If it is too dark, I cannot see. You know, we are limited. So, but we can, from that spectrum of experience, we can have a certain idea of the attributes of God. Why? Because we don't see God directly, we see God through His effects.
But Jesus Christ is a God.
Yes, but that is theology, though.
Okay.
Yeah. But we see Him as man. Nobody can see Jesus directly, he can see He is God. It is because He pretended to be God, He was crucified. Okay. And that is important too. We know God through His effects. In fact, all the proof of God are based on the effects, the facts. We contemplate and we say that is beautiful, you know. And we say, oh, that the author of that must be beautiful. That is very coherent. The author of that must be very intelligent, you know. It's the same when we admire a beautiful music, a beautiful statue, a beautiful painting, then we say that is smart. Or we see children and they are dancing, we say, yeah, a very good teacher, dance teacher, you know. We judge people from their activities. We have no thermometer to say, oh, 55% of capacity of playing music. No. We judge someone from the fact he plays music. You know? I can know somebody speaks English, but when he speaks English, I listen, you know. Okay? Now, because of that, what are the way to know God? It is because the way of immanence and the way of negation. Two ways of knowing God. First, when we see something positive, something beautiful, something order, etc., that is a via positiva, the positive way. We take the perfection, and that perfection we see is finite. We start from a finite perfection we see in things, and we go to the other of that. It is what we did when we proved the existence of God. You know? In fact, the attributes of God are attached to the proof of the existence of God. We cannot know God except from His effects. Of course, we can have intuition, revelation, but that is not philosophy. You know? Okay? So we take the qualities, we put that to the top, because that's via immanency, or way of immanence. Immanence, the top, immanence, the top. A bishop is an excellence, the cardinal is an immanence, the pope is holiness. But when I was in Cameroon, I received a letter, even the pope never received a title. He never received that title. I received a letter, it was actually in French first. À votre très haute divinity, to your highest divinity. To your highest divinity. So we live with Cardinal Léger in Cameroon. I say, you know the title I received? To your highest divinity. So every time he met me, he said, how is your highest divinity? Via of immanence, immanence. But at the same time, we are conscious that our knowledge of God through His effects is imperfect. So we have to detach from those attributes what is negative. We call that the negative way. For example, we can say God is intelligent, but is intelligent, as we are intelligent, but He is infinitely intelligent. He does not need to reason. We are intelligent, but we reason. You know? So we detach from God and imperfection, because it is imperfection for God to reason. God cannot reason. Of course, He knows what is reasoning, but He does not reason. It's a difference, okay? Why? Because to reason is to progress, to pass from potency to act. God cannot pass from potency to act. So you know the two ways to know God, the essence of God is that. To find the qualities we find in nature, in the human being, and we attribute those qualities to God. Why? Because when a cause produces something, it must possess the quality. No? If I play music, I must possess the quality of musician. No? So God, when He creates beauty, when He creates order, etc., but He is intelligent, He is beautiful, He is wise, etc. So from the effect, we can see the cause as the same and infinitely, no limit, no limit. But also at the same time, because it is a comparison, I must deny the limit. For example, you say every day, our Father who art in heaven. Okay? It was the gospel today, our Father. And when you say Father, you take the idea of Father, to give life, to love, to serve, to feed, etc. You put that to the infinite. But at the same time you say, okay, God, you are my Father, but not the same way that I, Antonio, my Father. You know? Antonio, my father, he smoked. You don't smoke. You know? He was limited, he died. You don't die. That, you know, you are aware of that, huh? So that is important, because all the knowledge of God is based on analogy. And if you read about the Bible, the Gospel, Jesus used continually analogy. call that parable, comparison, okay? So analogy, I spoke about that last week, I will not come back on that. Analogy of proportionality, the analogy of attribution, especially intrinsic attribution. When we spoke about being, being is in God, being is in the creatures, but not in the same way. Being is in God as say by himself, and we are being by another. And also I spoke at that time, I think, about the idea of participation. Participation. Because when we cause something, the thing participates in our qualities, in our skill. For example, you are a good carpenter, but the beauty of the desk is, in fact, is shared in the beauty, your skill, your capacity of doing something beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so I go next page. Well, we spoke about participation, I already explained that. Number 44.4 at the bottom of page 304. The divine attribute can be either entitative or operative. So, entitative comes from the word ens. Ens is the present participle in Latin of the verb esse, to be. Being, in Latin, to be is esse, and being is ens. Ens, entis. Okay? So here, entitative means being. Okay? That means the property of God as being, as himself. What makes him a God? Okay, in himself. And operative, opera, opus, operis in Latin, means work. Work. So the work of what God is producing, the effect of God, the power of God in creation, in conservation, in his relation with men. In fact, what are the two main faculties we can attribute to God? I cannot attribute God has no eye. He has no body. But God knows. He is intelligent and he is free. Intelligent and will. Free will. God knows everything and God wills. Omnipotent. Dixit, the fact that he said and things were made. Man David, he gave an order, the thing were accomplished. Okay? So that is the two divisions. So I read the text at the bottom of the page. In general, a divine attribute, that is the definition of what is a divine attribute. May be defined as an absolutely simple perfection. Absolutely simple perfection. Simple means no division, no mixture of potency, pure, simple, pure, no passage from potency to act, pure act. And also the word absolutely, depending on nobody. Absolus. Ab means separation, and solus alone. So to be totally alone, totally apart, absolute. So that means God, the attributes of God are simple and totally independent from his creation, from anything. It's totally transcendent. Okay? That exists in God necessarily and formally, necessarily. God exists as, say, by himself, and formally, that means they are what they constitute him. Remember what we saw just before, aseity. Aseity, it is his essence to exist by himself. That is what we mean here by formally. Is you know, formally is the perfection of the being of God. And that according to man's imperfection mode of knowing, either constitute the essence of the divine being, what is aseity, for example, ipsum subsistence, or is deduced from this essence. That means operative. You remember what is nature? Nature is essence as principle of operation. So we use, when we study God, we use the same categories we use when we study man. We know God by analogy with man. So man has a capacity of willing, a capacity of knowing. So in God there is also capacity of willing, capacity of, you know. Because if it is a perfection for us to know, to understand, to will, to love, if it is a perfection for us, a fortiori, is infinite perfection in God, you know. And it is simple without limit. Simple means also infinite, because there is no composition of anything. Okay, so now we have to see that in detail. So if you go to the next page, okay, alors you have the entitative attribute. We call sometimes, we say, metaphysical attribute. Relate to the very being of God, the fact He exists, not the fact He is operating something, doing something. You see the difference, huh? The fact He exists. Those perfections are, first is unicity. He is one and unique. There is only one God. It cannot be two gods, impossible. He is truth. Essentially, truth. I am the truth, Jesus said. Huh? He is perfect, He is goodness. He does not have goodness, He is goodness. His nature is to be good. Interesting? What do you have here? The three transcendental. You remember my triangle?
Yeah.
Being,
One, good and true.
one, true, and good. And that constitutes the essence of the being of God. Interesting, huh? Metaphysics and theology are united. Huh? God is essentially one, perfect, complete. And by the fact He is different. Huh? God is truth. He is truth, the source of all truth. God is good, the source of all good. Huh? The goodness. Okay? I continue. God is also infinite. That means there is no limit to His perfection. Why? Because when we study the first mover, we see that the first mover must be pure act, without any mixture of potency. Because change is based on mixture of potency. Things change because they are not totally what they're supposed to be. You know, God is perfectly what He is. Therefore, He is infinite. There is no limit of perfection because He is pure act. You know, it's interesting to know that the qualities in themselves have no limit. For example, the quality of beauty does not imply limit. The quality of truth does not imply limit. Perfection in themselves do not imply limit. They are limited because they are in a finite subject. But in God, the subject is infinite. That means every perfection in God is infinite. And that perfection does not limit God. Because He is infinite, that means every perfection being infinite, all perfection are one in Him. The distinction of perfection are not in God, they are in my mind. They are in my mind, why? Because I see the effects. You know, my knowledge is one by one, huh? But God knows everything in one singular act of knowledge. Huh? And that act of knowledge is eternal. Another reason, why He is eternal? Because He is pure act. Being pure act, he cannot change. He cannot become. That means he exists necessarily for all eternity. He cannot begin. If he begins, he's not pure act. If he begins, he's not assez. He is not. He depends on another. So all that, you know, the idea of eternity is a part of his essence. It is his essence. Because it's essentially eternal. Because God has no limit of perfection, he is immense. What is the meaning of immense? Mens, in Latin, mensare means to measure. God cannot be measured. Because he was measured, he was be finite, and he will be another one to measure him. God cannot be measured, you know. So nobody can measure God. But everything created by him is measured by him. That is the problem of man today. We don't want to be measured by God. We want to measure ourselves. Huh? Okay? Simply, okay. Now I continue. Those perfection in themselves, witness, bespeak no relation to contingent being. That means God is totally independent of contingent being. If you want, contingent being add nothing to his perfection. That means the perfection of contingent being is not adding something to God, but it is adding something to us. It is a pure act of love to create the world. He does not need that. You know? It's the same, I am a teacher, an old teacher, I teach for many, many years. I must say I learn, I continue to learn because I am not God. But you know, when I teach, I try to give the best I know. But that adds nothing to me. I am not becoming poorer. I don't, when I go out of the class, I act the same way. I have the same knowledge, but you know, it is your benefit. But by analogy, we can say it like that. God is totally perfect, totally love, is totally light, is totally intelligent. So it does not need us to understand. It does not need, you know, when we pray, we say, God knows before we know, we talk to Him, He knows everything. You know? Like your mother, when you approach your mother to ask her something, she knows a long time. Okay? Or when you meet your father when you were 16, to have the car of your father. Your father knew what he liked. He liked that his girl or his boy asked him the key of the car. You know, it was a pleasure. But God does not approve any pleasure because He's perfect. He can add nothing to God. If you can add something to God, God is no more God. Because He will pass from potency to act. Of course, don't teach that in your homily. But you must know that. And when we speak about God, most of the time we use analogy, we use anthropomorphism. But as a teacher, as a priest, as a believer, we must know exactly the value of what we say. A comparison is not describing the reality. Okay, I continue. Now the operative, so the two divine faculties of God, it is His knowledge, His intellect, and His will. And it is through His intellect and His will that He is operating, creating the world. So those operative attributes precede effects. And those effects are extrinsic to God. Creation and conservation. Creation from nothing, but it's not finished. We cannot exist. We are totally dependent on God. Totally dependent. Not only for the beginning, but for continuing to exist. So, and the relation with the creation, God with His creation is not only creation, it is conservation. And sometimes conservation, they call that the continued creation. In fact, God created us once for all, but He sustains us in our everything. every electron, every proton is known and will and sustained by God in his existence. Otherwise, it will disappear completely. And we know in science nothing disappears, nothing is annihilated. The law of Lavoisier, the French chemist Lavoisier. And to recompense him, he shortened him because he was guillotined. Stupidity, huh? One of the most important scientists of his time. You know, Pol Pot did that. We are afraid by what happened now by ISIS. That is nothing in comparison of what Pol Pot did in Burmany. Nothing. He killed systematically 1.5 million people, the third of the population. I have one of my students in Canada, he escaped from that. For example, all those who have glasses, they were executed. Because if they have glasses, they are learned, it was horrible, horrible. It is one of the worst. ISIS, they are choir boy. But what is horrible? When Pol Pot did that, almost nobody did something. Two ways to measure. That is horrible. When Pol Pot did that, almost nobody, no nation, did enter the country to stop that. No, not a single one. They get 1.5 million, the third of the population. You know, we must know the history. Huh? Of course, it is horrible what they did, but in other circumstances, it was much horrible, and we did almost nothing. We let Pol Pot do his job, and he killed systematically. And that is not very long, 30 years ago. Huh? Okay, hey, close the parenthesis. It's not theology, but it's linked with theology. Okay, now 44.5. The distinction of reason between perfection and God. Well, I told you that every perfection in God is infinite, and therefore they are necessarily one with the essence, with God. Yeah. So how we can distinguish them? We can distinguish them because of the effects outside of God in the creation. So we can distinguish mercy in God. We can distinguish justice, kindness, all that, because we see that in His creation. So it is a distinction of reasoned. A distinction of reasoned. That means a distinction with a foundation in the reality. So we can distinguish. For example, Saint Therese of Lisieux was asked, do you believe that hell exists? She said yes. But she continues, I hope there is nobody in it. And they continued the conversation, and she said, you know, I believe in the mercy of God because I believe in His justice. Because He's so infinitely just, He is infinitely merciful, because He knows our weakness, you know. That is interesting to see. Those attributes are different, but our God, they are one. But we can distinguish them because for God to forgive and for God to heal or to judge, that is different. But in God, it is one. It is different because of our way of knowing things. We know things one by one, separately. Okay? We must be aware of that. So if we put a division in God, if we can distinguish His different attributes, omnipotence, omniscience, goodness, mercy, etc., it is because we see that in His effects, not in Himself. In Himself is perfectly, and that distinction is a distinction of reasoned. You remember when we spoke in logic about distinction of reason, I told you that will come back. Here you have distinction of reason. Okay? Now I go to page 307. So what is the fundamental attribute of God? It is the fact that God exists by himself. Is subsistent. You have that at the bottom. Huh? It is commonly taught God is being itself subsistent by himself. And that is aseitas, or aseiti, anglicized, by itselfness, is the constitutive perfection of God. God shares with us his kindness, his justice, his mercy, even his power, because we work with him before his creation, but he cannot share his aseiti, the fact he exists by himself. So you know what is horrible? Three philosophers in the 20th century, they pretend that God does not exist because God is a creation of man. The three, not the three killer, but the three who killed God, if you want. Freud, he said God is the invention of man. Man and creator God, the Father, is the invention of man. Nietzsche and Karl Marx. They are the three, those who deny officially. Okay. They are the philosopher of the death of God. But it's funny, they died and God continued to exist. But they will have some surprise after that. I don't know what will happen. You know, I saw recently a movie. It is a historical fact. And that fact corresponds exactly to what I saw with my mother. The person is on his deathbed. And suddenly the person, she has no strength at all. And suddenly she sits and she looks and she becomes. That exactly happened to my mother. She was dying and suddenly, and she was blind at that time, she saw nothing. And suddenly we thought, she was not able to move, she was so, but she was able to redress. And for a long time she was looking at the horizon like that. And after that she died. What is that? I don't know. I will see that in heaven. Okay, so surprise. Surprise. I would like to talk with Karl Marx after. See, what do you think? What do you meet after your death?
Yeah.
Yes, brother.
At a regular university, do they study, the proofs of God or the proof of this divine being? And it just seems like if they do, there's a requirement that comes with acknowledging that these proofs are true.
They prove what?
Do they study these, for example, at Yale, do they study the proofs of the existence of God and the attributes of God?
Yes, but everything is received to the disposition of the receiver. We can, first, the proof of the existence of God are a syllogism. Okay? So in every syllogism you can use bad, wrong proposition. For example, Karl Marx, his general principle is there is only one reality, matter. So, of course, you are conditioned by that. That is the case of many people of Yale and Harvard. They don't believe in God because for them there is John Dewey is only matter. Only matter. So you can, they are stopped by their bulb. They live in the bulb, we say, bubble, in a bubble, and they cannot go outside of that. Because in philosophy there is always a postulate at the beginning. For example, St. Thomas, Aristotle, he said, there is being. Descartes, he says, I think, therefore I exist. And Marx and materiality said there is only one reality, matter, who exists only what I can measure. Positivism, because in front of the truth there is always the freedom of man. We never forget that. We can have the best proof. If you don't will to accept the proof, you not will. You deny. Even sometimes you say that is true, but you deny. In the gospel, Jesus called that the sin against the Holy Spirit. When we deny the reality. For example, to say that all the organization of the human being is the fruit of chance, that is to be really blind. It's not voluntary. Because we have a postulate at the beginning. The postulate is there is only one reality, matter, because we don't want that God exists. No. Don't forget, huh? When you want to teach Latin, John, you must know John. Sometimes John does not want to understand. In our society, many people don't want to understand. Even at the time of Jesus, imagine Jesus resurrected Lazarus. And many believe in him, but the other they say, we will kill not only Jesus, we will kill Lazarus also. You know? The same even, we can see the human body and see that is a marvel. I remember some biologist, he said, after having studied the body, I knelt down. I knelt down because that cannot be the fruit of matter, cannot be. But others, they say, oh no, all that is the fruit. And they continue to teach in our university. You know. So we live in the kingdom of darkness, don't forget now. The kingdom of darkness. Okay, so I finished I have a few minutes, by the page 307. So the attribute is the fundamental, CET is the attribute properly belong to God and distinguish God from His creature. What is this? I will say the specific, if I can say that. What is putting God totally apart is that God exists by Himself and therefore He depends on nobody. But the consequence is very serious. We depend on Him. We depend on Him. Even if we don't like that, we don't exist by ourselves. I continue. Though all other divine perfection can be imitated analogically, only existence of Himself is absolute proper to God. Each divine attribute contains being. Finally, it can be said that the divine attributes are implied in the other only because each contains being. In fact, every attribute for us is a mode of being. Is a mode of being. So, it is being. But the difference between we and God, for example, if we are true, we tell the truth. We tell the truth, we are true, we are not the truth. If we are kind, we are not the kindness. If we love, we are not love. Interesting, St. John, when he wants to speak about God, but he says, God is love. Interesting, it does not say as love for us, no, is love. It's different to be and to have. To have is not my essence. To be is my essence. So the essence of God is one with His attribute. Because all that are one with the being of God. What is the being of God is to exist by Himself. In fact, everything comes back to that. And pure act and existing by Himself. All the attributes start from that. Unfortunately, I don't have time, but it will be very interesting to take every proof and to find all the attributes we can take from that. Incredible. And we arrive to a great knowledge of God only through reason. And Vatican first is allowed, is just to say we have to believe that we are able to know God through our reason and to go very farther. Very, very far. Of course, our faith helps us to avoid some error. But the way we don't refer to the Bible in that. We refer only to the intellect God gave us. I will finish by here. Okay, infinity implies intelligence. God is intelligent. God is love. God is personal. That is important. Our God is personal. Okay? is eternal, because infinity is nothing more than an infinity of being. So in this sense, God is indeed ipsum esse subsistent. He who is, I say by himself, the being whose essence and existence are one. The essence of God is to exist. My essence is to be a rational animal. Existing? No. A rational animal. Able to exist. Having the potency to exist, potentiality, but I'm not existing. If I am existing today, it is contingent. So the existence for me does not belong to my definition. It's not a part of my essence. It is something I receive. But God possessed, is not only possessed, He is existent. And therefore every being share in the being of God. Depend on the being of God to exist. It's very strong. Very, very strong. And finally, other opinion, for example, the infinity itself, but infinity cannot exist in a value being, but only in a being as se. Infinity cannot exist in a being depending on another. Infinity supposes there is no limitation. But in fact, I cannot say the essence of God to be infinite. In fact, the infinity of God is a consequence of His aseity. And because God is existing by Himself, He has no limitation, so He is infinite. You know, the subsistent intellection. Of course, God is thinking. Not Plato. Aristotle said God is the thought thinking Himself. It's true. God thinks Himself. But it is the essence of God. Why God can think Himself? Because first, He exists by Himself. My intellect depends on my existence, no? The first reality is existence. Existence. And finally, intelligence. God is intelligence, of course. But the foundation of His being is not first to know, it's to exist. That is the big mistake of Mr. Descartes. He said, I think, I am intelligent, therefore I exist. In fact, I exist, so I am intelligent. My intelligence, if it depends on the fact I exist as a human being. And not my human being depends on my intelligence. So, in fact, finally, on the conclusion of that, the central, the foundation, the essence of God is to exist. In God, essence and existence are one. And now, you can see the importance of what you study in philosophy, in metaphysics, when I try to explain to you essence and existence. You know, here, you see now, if you understand essence is receiving existence, that is for finite being. God, His essence is to exist. That means His nature, His essence is to be. To be. Period. And because He exists by Himself, everything depends on Him. So if there is life on earth, God is the source of life. And the source and the model. Not only is the source, the cause, is also the exemplary. The exemplary. The model. The source and the model. It is so true that, and that is a theological reflection, that in the Bible we see God created man at His image and resemblance. So I think you have a lot of things to meditate before going to bed, but try to sleep well. You know, to study theology is a prayer, huh? It's not necessary.